Morning, everyone. Welcome to our panelists. Before I get to questions, I'm going to have each one of you very briefly introduce yourself, who you are and what you do at your companies, and then we'll get going. We'll start with Serena.
Hi, I'm Serena. I work at Publicis Media as a manager of our talent acquisition team, and we focus on hiring a lot of, not just for our external agencies, but the internal employees who support those agencies. So, a lot going on.
Hi everyone, lovely to be here. My name is Tom Brunskill. I'm the GM and co-founder of a company called Forage. Despite the accent, I live in San Francisco, and what we do at Forage is we work with large Fortune 500 style companies such as Walmart, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan to create online job simulations, typically for entry-level talent, to understand different careers at different companies.
Linda.
Hi everybody, I'm Linda Marioni. I'm with LHH, and we provide solutions for every facet of the talent journey, from recruitment to career coaching development to transition and mobility. And I'm based here in New York, so it was an easy commute today.
Hi everybody, I'm Steve Kepp. I'm the editor of From Day One and co-founder. And my background is journalism, and that's what I'm still doing today. My background there was editing at Time Magazine and Fortune, doing the Time 100 and the Fortune 500. Magazines love lists and numbers, as you can imagine. And I'm at virtually all our events, and I'm here to represent what we hear about talent acquisition and related fields on stage and backstage from coast to coast. So that's my contribution.
Welcome to all of you. All right, we'll start here. So I've been chatting with these guys downstairs, and I've been asking them, what are they spending most of their time on these days? And there have been two themes. One of them is internal talent development, and then the other is the volume of applications, how to handle that, how to give all candidates the respect that they deserve, then how to find the needles in the haystack, the really, really good candidates when you have 5,000 applications coming in. So let's start here. Linda, I'm gonna come to you first. So as companies are slowing hiring, as I'm sure a lot of you are doing, they're leaning on skills-based work for internal mobility. That internal talent pipeline is really, really important. So Linda, how are you seeing companies tapping the talent they already have to get the best results?
Sure. Mobility is becoming more and more part of the recruitment conversation versus part of the retention conversation. While it's still a very important retention tool, companies are coming to us saying, well, if we're going through a transformation, how can you help us assess our internal talent, mobilize our internal talent, make the right matches so that we don't lose that talent to the market because we haven't yet identified creatively where else they could be a fit in our organization. And that's become more and more part of our recruitment business and solutions that we bring to our larger customers versus just as a recruitment business going out into the market and finding talent, but helping them match their talent internally.
Serena, you and I were chatting downstairs about internal mobility, of course, and this has really been a good point of leverage when you're negotiating with candidates and really pitching Publicis to them. Tell me about how you're framing internal mobility to external candidates.
Yeah. Our internal mobility, we provide access to every single employee at the company. And it's across not just the pillars within Publicis Group, but across the entire holding company. Internal candidates will still go through the same interview process as an external candidate, but we do try and prioritize internal candidates. We confirm their eligibility for transfer, that they're in good standing and whatnot. Time in the role is taken into account, but prioritization of those candidates to give them an opportunity to move around is something we also talk about in the initial recruiting stage for candidates who are wanting to be employees, because it's talking about the growth that they can achieve while at the company, and then creates more retention for us as well for someone who is interested in something new, whether it's a promotion or trying a new account or trying a new sector of the industry. They have the opportunity to interview for that type of position and continue their career with Publicis Group without having to go find it somewhere else.
So for early career candidates, what are some of the most pressing concerns that you're hearing from universities and employers about the new generation of workers coming into the workforce? Tom, would you take this one?
Yes, so I think at the moment what we see from the employer side is just like really trying to understand who are the high intent applicants in early talent. Using your kind of analogy before with the haystack, what we're seeing with our partners at Forage is that haystack of candidates, early talent candidates, is growing exponentially. We're seeing companies that typically receive 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 applications increased by 50% over the last 12 months because of what AI has enabled early talent to do in terms of just like the sheer number of applications that they can send out, and applications which are seemingly look personalized if they're effectively leveraging those tools. So that haystack is kind of exponentially growing. The number of needles that they're hiring are simultaneously shrinking. And the resources that they have to find those needles are obviously not growing kind of commensurate to that candidate pool. So like one of those like fundamental challenges that we're seeing with our partner employers engaging with early talent is being able to identify who, as like a first screen, like who are those high intent candidates who have kind of taken the time to understand their brand, their work, their people, their culture, and then making that very first kind of deliberate step in the application process to ultimately pursue a career at that company.
Steve, you're talking to TA leaders all the time, all year. What are you hearing from those who are going further and further up the talent pipeline and looking at college talent, even those looking outside of traditional four-year degree universities? What are you hearing from them?
Well, there's two examples. One is a packaging company in Philadelphia told us about, on a panel, told us about how they go into high schools and they have kids come and tour the factory, and if they sign on, there's a bonus when they graduate. So they get very well acquainted with what the company does. And then if they want to go on to more, there's tuition reimbursement for tech schools and things like that. So they really think kind of like making an investment in these young folks. And then I was talking downstairs to one of the people in our audience named Jared, who represents an accounting firm. And as you may have read in the business press, there's a shortage of accountants. Apparently people don't think it's glamorous. So, but they're very much needed. So one of the things they do, there's a team at this accounting firm that goes out to colleges, especially ones where they can be very visible and not just going everywhere, but like Baruch College downtown, which is a very good business school. They'll really pour it on to try to find people there that they can draft, or Rutgers, schools like that. And get them involved in internships, and then just create a high visibility on campus for their firm.
I actually did a story last year about accounting firms needing to recruit, and there were two interesting strategies. One, big firms like PwC, and I can say this because I wrote it in the story and it's public, they're working with trade organizations to launch social media marketing campaigns and actually sponsoring influencer posts to talk about how cool accounting is and how young people should really, this is true, it's on TikTok, it's on Instagram, and they report that it's actually been quite successful in at least getting awareness around accounting. There are a lot of young career influencers out there who are happy to talk about this kind of work because it is really steady, stable work, even if it's not extremely high paying. So anyway, let's talk about the candidate experience. So Tom mentioned just the sheer volume of applications that are coming in. It's really difficult, as I'm sure many of you know, to make sure everyone's feeling respected, to actually review all of the applications. So I'm interested to know where you all are really investing in the candidate experience, maybe at what points in the funnel. Serena, would you start us here?
Sure. I mean, you're investing in the entire candidate experience from end to end. You're the first line of defense is what I tell my recruiters. But part of that investment is taking the time to go through every resume, or as many as possible. And for us, that's might be blocking off several hours or even a day. Sometimes it's bringing the team in, depending on the amount of volume, to make sure that we are contacting as many candidates as possible who are applying. As far as the investment through the process, it's all about, follow-up and touch bases, keeping them warm. These are phrases we're all familiar with, but it's, are we actually doing it? Are we taking the time? Are we building a cadence of that follow-up? Is it every 2 days? Is it once a week? And you determine that with your team. For us, it's, as frequently as possible, and being in constant communication with our hiring teams about that feedback that we're hearing so that we can continue that follow-up conversation so candidates who we want to cross that final hiring line feel included in the entire process along the way, as long as it might take sometimes.
Linda, most important parts of the talent pipeline where you're seeing leaks at the moment, how are companies identifying those? How do you fix those points in the leaky pipeline?
Well, I think the first part of the leaky pipeline is the haystack. And companies are facing that more and more. I think we all, you've said it perfectly, the haystack is growing, but talent acquisition teams are not growing at the same rate as the haystack. And so we've seen corporations employ our teams, recruiters, to come in and help weed through that haystack, because that initial contact does create that stickiness, and it is a very big part of the candidate experience and the relationship with that organization. And so bringing the candidates in is the first part, not having that leak at the initial onset. There's candidates that have shown interest in your organization. And then, of course, right, there is the age-old saying, time kills all deals, and it is never more true in talent acquisition. The longer it takes, the more drop-off there are, and the longer it takes in the process, the drop-off is more critical, because those are the candidates of interest. And so really using recruiters or using your internal team to make sure that stickiness is there and that constant communication is there, the further into the process, is really critical, because those are the candidates that you have the most interest in.
Steve, you talk to HR tech leaders all the time, folks who are creating HR tech, and then those who are, of course, using it in their organizations. Most novel applications for tech that you're seeing right now to improve that experience?
It sounds like, from what I've heard, that is scheduling tech there's a lot of it, plenty of choices. So that's not, the cutting edge seems to be more, from what I've heard, is in the interviewing aspect of tech, the recording, the analysis of it, then the ability to share with other people who might be hiring managers. But it's also, it's interesting that there's more skills needed on both sides of the camera. Like younger people who are used to texting their feelings and their thoughts or something, need to learn more interviewing skills. But then the people doing the interviewing too need to have prompts and things like that. And I think the technology can help both sides. People can watch their own videos, and then hiring manager or talent acquisition people can be reviewing and just bringing up the level of conversation to really get at, is this person, can we discover the qualities in this person that are really going to lead to a good outcome? So yes, that seems like one part of the process that's really important right now.
Tom, recommendations for introducing tech, but still making sure that experience is a really personal one.
Yeah, so at Forage, we love this idea of positive friction. Is like, how can talent recruitment teams thoughtfully, it's interesting, right? Because if you think about like technology and what technology has done to the job application process, or like any type of process, it's all about how do you remove friction from the process. So, I mean, that's where we've found ourselves in a world of like one-click applications. AI has like augmented just the scale of applications that candidates can take. So the partners that we're working with really thoughtfully think about this idea of positive friction, which is like, how can you include aspects into the candidate experience, which allows you to identify more easily identify the high intent applicants, especially if you're dealing with like 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 plus applications, but you simultaneously ensure that the candidate extracts real value from that positive friction. And so like job simulations would be one example of that. Like if you do say if you're doing let's use the accounting, KPMG audit simulation on Forage, as a candidate, you're building real skills, you're building confidence, you're able to use that on your CV, you understand the profession better. And so that allows an employer like KPMG to identify like high intent students that are engaged with their brand. And if that student doesn't end up getting that job, they can still use that experience that they built there. So there are numerous ways that companies use positive friction, but that's how we think a lot of our partners thoughtfully approach that challenge of volume.
I had a conversation yesterday with a hiring manager at a small but very chic name brand tech company. And something that they were doing was hiring candidates as a contractor, like for one day. She called it a collaboration day, in which they're bringing in that job candidate to work on specific projects. In this case, they were fully remote, so this person works with them on Slack, some virtual projects, through Zoom or whatever it may be. They paid this person, and this was sort of like a simulation, an audition, if you will. They ended up hiring that person. Now, of course, they don't hire that many people a year. They can afford to do that, and they're not worrying about scale. But that was one of the first times I had heard about that, where companies what she was trying to do was get at the person behind the application, which is kind of what you're expressing, Tom, where there's such a big volume. These applications can be polished so perfectly using AI, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's hard to know who's really on the other side of that. So I just thought that was an interesting application. It seems like, Tom, what you're doing is really catching on. So, Serena, when we talked before, you mentioned a neurodivergence initiative that Publicis has been working on, and you led, correct, last year. Tell us more about that and how it's affected the TA process for y'all.
Yeah, this was a really exciting initiative that we took on last year. Neurodiversity is everywhere, and it's a very large spectrum that directly impacts everyone. And this was something that we were excited to introduce to the interviewing process. So first it was a lot of research and seeing how we could apply neurodiversity training to the interview training process. And then it was applying that and teaching it to our hiring teams on an individual and scaled level. We included things like making sure they're putting questions in the question box ahead of time in the video so that candidates can revert back to it if needed. Sometimes when we're really excited in the interview process, we digress, we get off topic. So this was something that we found really helpful, giving candidates the option ahead of time if they wanted to be on video or not, especially in this virtual world we're living in. It can be a lot of pressure for different individuals. And being open to repeating the questions. We also talked about font size in materials that we're sharing, avoiding certain colors and using other ones primarily. So we could and it benefits everyone, not just neurodiverse candidates. It's not something we were asking ahead of time if a candidate needed any requirements. It was just let us know how we can help you through this process, if you want to use video or not and whatnot. As far as how this has impacted our TA team on a scale level, we had great feedback and responses from our hiring teams. They all were very excited and on board with participating in the neurodiversity interview training. And we actually also started partnering with a nonprofit vendor who helped us place several intern level candidates who were specifically neurodiverse, and we ended up converting one of them to a full-time employee. So it was something that we were really excited about and are continuing to include in our training for interview teams.
Who joined you in working on this? A lot of things that you described sound like user experience. Mm-hmm. So who did you work with in the organization to make those things happen, to come up with the changes that needed to be made?
Yes, our talent equity and inclusion team was a huge help for us, making sure that we were, this was inclusive of not only neurodiverse candidates and neurodiverse team members, but anyone, anywhere these rules could be applied to and useful to. Additionally, of course, our HR partners were a big part of it. And then we don't have just one TA team at Publicis Group. We're several different sectors who focus on different parts of the holding company. So sharing that out with our wider talent organizations was something that we were able to do later on in the process, so we could do this company-wide.
I understand that employers are leaning on non-full-time employees more and more. Linda, this is something that you and I have talked about. Contract workers, freelancers, different forms of part-timers. This is great news for someone like me who is a freelancer, so I appreciate it from all of you. Linda, why are companies doing that? Why are they leaning on it more? And what's their strategy for attracting that? How different is it from attracting a full-time employee?
So that's becoming more and more the trend, and that's one of the mega trends that we've identified at LHH as a transformation in the workforce, where contingent labor historically and freelancers were plugging a hole. They were interim solutions, project work, leave coverage, things of that nature, and they were typically handling non-core work, where there's a shift. 80% of C-suite executives in enterprise organizations are saying they are looking at their overall talent strategy to include contingent labor, to include freelancers, SOW work, to handle core work. So it's more moving from a defensive, I need to cover projects, to a strategic move in overall workforce planning. Two main reasons are driving that. One is the economics of it, right? Financially, it's helpful for an organization. But two is the agility that organizations that are going through transformation need to be able to scale up and down quickly and to tap into the market. So on the other side of that, the talent market is demanding more diverse work that they're doing, project work, flexibility in work. And so to tap into that part of the workforce and remain agile, companies need to be able to include more contingent labor and freelancers to have a well-rounded workforce. Not only can they handle the fluctuation of business, but they can also tap into talent that may not be seeking full-time employment. So, I mean, that's great news for our temp staffing business. But more and more, it's not just contingent labor, it's that SOW work that is core labor, specifically in accounting.
Would that include the fractional workers? I mean,
Yes.
I just know somebody who is a great HR person where I used to work at Time Warner, so a big Fortune 500 company, full-time gig. But now he's a fractional CHRO for startups and smaller companies, and there are people like him. So is that growing? Is that
Yeah, I mean, specifically in HR, because there's so much transformation, and like while HR historically, and we were just talking about this earlier backstage, is working was historically in silos, whether it's the organizational development or transformation or recruitment. They're so intertwined now, and so there's a lot more need to scale up and down in the HR organization as companies are transforming. And so that's a big part of the contingent
merging
workforce.
and all that sort of thing?
Absolutely.
Steve, I've seen that too. I think Fortune's been doing a lot of reporting on that. They had an article, or maybe it was the headline for one of their CEO newsletters, when the CEO is a temp, and how the fractional work or interim executives have really increased. I think there was a Challenger report that came out in the last few months that actually put data to that those are increasing. So, part-time, fractional, interim work at all levels of the organization is becoming more common. Do you think that's a reflection of, does that come out of the gig economy, do you think, and just this being used to new ways of working?
Probably based on a lot of disruption, or probably, I would imagine too, right now a lot of companies are like not wanting to make big investments in lots of new full-time staffs with benefits and things like that. So if you're kind of sitting still a little bit, waiting for certain things like tariffs to drop and that, you might use more contingent workers. I think that would be another motivation for it.
Linda, what's it like to recruit for a contingent worker versus a full-time employee? Are you approaching folks that are interested in full-time and saying, what about this? Or you sort of have two different strategies tapping two different pools?
It's twofold. For our teams, our recruiters, because we are in the professional recruitment space, our recruiters are typically in the field that they recruit. So our legal recruiters, our former attorneys, our accounting and finance recruiters, our CPAs. And so the network is a little bit different, but they are recruiting for both facets. So if someone is gainfully employed, they would typically only be really seeking some permanent employment, but might be open to a higher level role in a contract, because in some cases, even on a short-term basis, they may pay more than they are making day to day. And then other than that, it is a conversation. And so if you're attracting the right conversation, and that's, I think the other shift in the business is it's, historically temp workers may have a different type of interview or different type of experience coming into an organization. But now, because the work that they're doing is core to the business, it's business critical, and the length of time that they may be there can be significant. And so engaging that candidate, clearing that candidate, really making sure they are the right fit is just as critical as if they were taking a permanent position on both sides. Because they're coming and they're doing business critical work, they're making an impact on the organization, and they will be valued in that work, so they need to make sure that it's a good cultural fit.
Are companies willing to invest in the career development of those workers, or is it more like, we expect you to come in and be ready to roll? In terms of skills?
So skill-based career development is what we see as they're still recruiting for a certain skill set, but there is more investment in coaching, online coursing, some type of internal mentorship, not as much as internal career development for full-time colleagues, but there is more being offered today than was yesterday for a contingent workforce,
Many of us in this, Okay. Many of us in this room entered the workforce for the first time, not in a skills-based market, but more in a job-based market. But students today, Tom, are exiting into this very skill-focused, skill-based. Companies are saying, I need this skill to come in. Do you feel like companies and young workers are in agreement over what needs to be had when coming into a company? Are companies wanting skills and college students thinking jobs? Does that make sense?
Yes. I don't know if I would say they're in disagreement. If you think about a student, right? Everyone was a student or was trying to find their first job, or might have a relative that's going through that right now. They don't know what they don't know. And so what we're seeing companies, I think like the trend that we're seeing is, everyone talks about this, but like higher education, traditional higher education continues to fall further behind in terms of equipping young people with the relevant skills, knowledge to make like an informed career decision. And so what we're seeing is that companies are now taking action into their own hands. And so we're seeing that employers place a lot of value in the talent attraction process on candidate education. So that's like educating the candidate pool around what are the different compelling careers that are in their company. Coming back, like if I'm doing my job, if I'm sitting at my desk or whatever it is that I'm doing at my job, what is it that I'm actually going to be doing? What are the projects I'm going to be working on? What are the tools that I'm going to be using? Who are the types of people will I be working with? So we're really seeing that employers are like treating that as a real responsibility and kind of stepping up to the plate and doing a lot of that kind of career education that they've waited for higher education to do, but higher education has not got there. And that gap, especially, we were talking about accounting before, one of our Big Four partners was talking about how business has told them it's now table stakes when they're looking at talent to look at entry-level talent, aptitude of using like Gen AI tools. But with all due respect, do you think higher education are running courses on like how to effectively like use Gen AI like in the workforce? Like no. So like employers are really like stepping up and starting to do that education at not just an employee level, but at a candidate level as well.
So it sounds like employers are just finding it more efficient to say, we'll train them rather than waiting on a university system to change? Have they gone to universities, are you finding?
Yeah, I mean, this is a funny thing. I don't think I'm speaking too out of turn here. We recently had a event where we had super senior, because we work very closely with the higher education system, 2-year colleges, 4-year boot camps, and we had a series of SVPs of TA come to a round table. And, there was like some lamenting that higher education wasn't doing a great job of equipping early talent with the skills for the workforce. And we asked the question, how often do you talk to higher education about what you need? And there was silence. And they're like, well, we don't really. And so I think that it's not about apportioning blame here. It's about figuring out how do you genuinely and authentically build constructive dialogue between higher education and employers to prepare young people for the world of work. And there are plenty of ways that we see that almost better in the 2-year college system than we do in the 4-year system. I think that's probably because 2-year colleges are a little bit more amenable to having employers help shape and form curriculum. But it is happening more and more in 4-year colleges, especially as that consumer expectation that a 4-year degree leads to gainful employment continues to increase, and people question the value and the cost associated with a degree. And so we are starting to see higher education employers come together to kind of solve this problem.
How far in the future are employers thinking? So Gen Z is who's exiting university systems or even 2-year degrees now. Gen Alpha is about to turn 15 this year or next, I think, the oldest.
Yep.
Are they thinking about that yet?
They are, and it's going to be different. And because we're part of a company that also serves 15 higher education institutions and schooling systems throughout the US. One thing that a lot of talent acquisition, the really forward-looking talent acquisition teams are thinking about is this confluence of changing dynamics in the talent that they're going to be engaging. So we've spoken about an increased need for a desire for entering a contingent position versus a full-time position, where you're also looking, the labor force participation rates continue to decline every single year. I think we're at a point now where there are more people kind of retiring than entering the workforce for the first time in history. So there are. And then you look at the impact of COVID on education of Gen Alpha. So if you look at any benchmark, the mathematical literacy or language literacy of the folks that you're going to be recruiting in 3-4 years, or if they're coming out of college 6-7 years, they are substantially behind in the education because of what happened during COVID, and that disproportionately impacts students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who didn't have access to resources or technology through that period. So talent, the really thoughtful talent acquisition leaders know that the talent that they're hiring in kind of 3, 5, 7 years is going to have some really unique challenges and look very different to the talent that they're hiring today out of Gen Z.
Steve, when you talk to TA leaders, what are you hearing about their relationship with Gen Z? Are they getting better at recruiting this generation that is, quickly aging into management positions?
I think they have to be able to kind of look past the generational quirks a little bit to see what the talent really is. I mean, I have seen it from the other side too. I have a younger son who's about to graduate next month, and he got an interview. Somebody flagged his resume and got an interview at a real prestige company, and he had the interview and everything. And in his thank you letter, it wasn't really a thank you letter. It was a critique of their whole process of interviewing and responding, and not really what they expected. And when he told me this, I was horrified. I said, no, as far as you're concerned, everything is awesome. That was incredibly good. So he's very technically talented, but then there's some other parts that probably get in the way, and that company couldn't really see past probably. So I think that generation has to be socialized more. And that generation also did go through COVID, and where they were isolated, and so maybe some of those interactive skills didn't get learned for a certain cohort of people. So I think that's one of the things that. Also, those people want to move fast, and that's the other notorious thing about them. And they expect to go really quickly, and there isn't always room because nobody's moving. At the moment, there isn't as much internal mobility. But I think there's a lot of talent out there.
When you say they expect to move fast, are you hearing your son going, "Hey, it's been 2 weeks," or what are you seeing in like what is fast to that generation?
Just from talent management people that you hear, speakers, it's just people, they're in a job a year and they want to be in management or they want to go on to the next thing, but that's kind of human nature. But it's especially true for people who are used to things moving a little quicker.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's certainly part of that that's just hubris of youth, right?
Yeah.
Thinking I've been doing something for a year, I'm a master of this, but being ill prepared. Because I think as a millennial, I may or may not have had that confidence.
I think it gets back to the internal mobility opportunities too.
Mm-hmm.
We talked with the head of HR for Bloomberg News, and she's got like 3,000 journalists who are notoriously restless to think about. And they have all these programs for sending someone overseas or job swapping and doing all these things to keep people, energized and engaged and so on.
This is something that I happen to know Serena is really good at. So this internal movement. Tell us the kind of program that you have to make sure people can move internally. And then I'd like for you to tell us how that factors into your external hiring process.
Yeah, we touched a little bit on this earlier with like the opportunities for prioritizing those internal employees and making sure that they're still meeting those same hiring steps as external candidates. And along with that, it's not just about identifying an opportunity for lateral movement, but it's also about an opportunity for growth. In addition to that, we have a lot of learning and development within the company, a product that we provide over 80,000 classes to our internal employees that allow us to give them opportunities to learn of how to manage up, how to have difficult conversations, how to build confidence in a conversation that you're in with senior leaders. A lot of especially within talent acquisition, you have very junior level recruiters who are sitting in a room with executive leads to work on a role. How are you giving them the confidence to say, hey, I might have 20 plus years less experience than you, but I know what I'm talking about and I'm a subject matter expert in talent acquisition, so you should listen to what I have to say about process and prioritization and making sure that we're, keeping candidates warm but not leaving them in the process hanging to just decline them later on. That applies across internal mobility for candidates as well, having those conversations with them, making sure they're engaged, but also that they're happy in the event that they don't get the job. So there's a lot of things we're working on from an internal mobility perspective.
When does that come into play when recruiting from the outside? And please talk about your retention rate. This is so good.
I do. Part of talent acquisition, or I would say the entirety of talent acquisition, is selling the company and the role to the candidate. And a huge part of that is compensation, especially for any level talent. I find that junior level talent, they have a lot of confidence in asking for more compensation than what we're budgeted for. But to temper them a little bit, you have to sell the rest of the company. And sometimes that's, we have these really great medical coverage benefits, or we have a fantastic 401k match program, and we have, paternity leave if you get a new pet, and like there are little fun things like this, vacation time and everything. But being able to talk about our retention rate, we're a company of over 90,000 employees across the globe, and we have a 90% retention rate. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we allow for internal mobility. There have been so many instances over the last year plus, especially that I've seen here at Publicis, that we've, there are account shifts and workload changes, and that sometimes requires a reduction in that team. And we look internally for where else can we put this person? Where do we have an open opportunity where these skills align that we can place this person so they don't have to leave us. And a lot of our internal mobility is also applied to that growth in the classes I was telling you about. So all of that goes into our retention, and I, and along with my recruiters on my team, sell that from the very first conversation. So when you're talking to candidates and they bring up, well, that compensation's not really what I'm looking for, or can I get like 5 or 10K more? The conversation is, well, I can't offer you that, but what I can do is tell you about all these other great opportunities that we have here. And our retention is a huge factor in some of that. Again, the company growth and development that you can receive laterally and out within your professional skill set, also outside of that. That's really what we really talk about and sell. And I have to admit, my team has closed several candidates on just that outside of the regular monetary paycheck that they're going to get.
Please brag about your retention rate. It is
around 90% right now.
Great. Thank you. Steve, to what extent are you finding that TA is using benefits as an attractor over salary at this point?
Yeah, I think especially when companies need to know their workforce too, and what is attractive to them. There's one panel we did, it was also in Philadelphia, where a TA person said that for a children's hospital, it was pointed out to them by some employees that they did not offer fertility benefits. It seemed terribly ironic and not fair and wrong and everything. So once some people started speaking up about that, they of course rectified that. So it's about listening. It's also, especially in a field like healthcare, where there's still labor shortages and it's hard to retain people and there's high levels of burnout. You really need to be sensitive to what attracts people and then what keeps people. And I think certainly everything in the realm of wellness seems really popular right now because people are stressed out and there's so much uncertainty out there. So anything innovative or that helps people either connect with care or connect with each other so that they can compare notes and have some, sympathy, empathy, and all those other kinds of good qualities that help people get through tough times.
I did a story, I think it was last year, about some of the more novel benefits employers are offering. Paternity leave was one of them. Here's 2 more ideas for you. A pizza chain out of Philly was offering free tattoos as long as it was the logo of the company. And then I have a friend who works at Encino, which is a fintech company out of Wilmington, North Carolina, huge surf town. Used to live there myself. And free surf lessons for anybody who wants to do it during the workday. Just think about that. Okay, so we are about to wrap up. What I'd like to hear from each of you is one challenge that you think you're going to spend a lot of time this year trying to solve, whether it's in your own company or with clients that you work with. And then Steve, maybe a theme that you're seeing among HR leaders. So we'll start with Serena.
That's a great question. I would say the challenge of every employer is attracting talent from the start, but also I think with the challenges that we have with the job market, it's I hate to bring up it's not, I don't mean it in a political way, but there are so many unknowns that we're working with that are tied to the economy and politics. And with that, where there's just so many unknowns as to where that's going to take talent acquisition. We saw a few years ago there was a huge reduction in force, specifically in talent acquisition. I have so many partners who were out of an opportunity for an extended period of time. We're seeing that job market start to turn around, but every day is always an unknown, and we never know where things are going to go. And that's going to consistently be a challenge, I would say, not just today, but in the past and in the future. It's going to be a constant ongoing, and how we can pivot with that job market to make sure that we're still providing opportunities to hire and opportunities of growth and opportunities of retention.
Tom.
We've spoken about it a lot today. I haven't actually, but internal mobility. So like a lot of our partners are now reimagining how they can use simulations and do candidate education to facilitate internal mobility. So how do you showcase different kind of compelling career opportunities to your frontline, typically your kind of frontline workforce. So that's like a new area for us and a new challenge that we're really excited by.
Thanks, Tom. Linda?
I think in addition to the uncertainty in the workforce, which is real, the use of AI and how much is too much, right? How much can drive efficiency? And we're in the human capital business. All of our business is based on human touch and interaction. And how much of it is too much that takes the human out of the human interaction. And there's a lot of testing and pushing those limits. And as AI advances, that is constantly something that we're analyzing and looking at and spending a lot of time on. But I think getting that right balance and maintaining that right balance as the world continues to shift will be and remains a very big challenge for us.
Close us out, Steve.
Sure. I think I would emphasize too the candidate experience too, because so many young people are now sending out zillions of applications and getting ghosted, and that makes it very hard for companies to kind of respond, in a way that leaves a good impression. So I know that even in the analog past, I remember applying to Time and Newsweek for a job. I got a very condescending note back from Newsweek saying, we only hire people with advanced degrees and this and that and the other thing. But I saved that, and then I got hired by Time, and then a couple decades later, I got hired to run Newsweek for a while, and I dug up the letter and put it on my bulletin board, who's talking
Exceptionally
now?
done, all of you. Thank you so much.
So those sort of human, pardon?
Who's keeping score?
Those human instincts go through the generation, and the technology changes. But I think that candidate experience is going to be really important.
Well, thanks to all of you. Appreciate it so much. Well done.